OK, to kick off, footballing hero Marcus Rashford said kids will go to bed tonight not only hungry, but feeling like they don't matter, after the government snubbed his plea to give them free school meals over the holidays. Marcus also shared this picture of himself as a child. Now, as we knew, he grew up on the breadline and relied on free school meals. Well, following that decision, Conservative MP Ben Bradley tweeted, "Extending free school meals to school holidays passes responsibility for feeding kids away from parents to the state. It increases dependency." Judi, where do you sit on this?
You know, it's terrible. What Marcus Rashford has done is just absolutely amazing. And it's so hard for parents out there, and I think there is a stigma against particular parents who find themselves in a predicament where they are having to pick between certain bills and buying food for their kids. I think the way that MP has responded, it just really... could you imagine being that parent right now, watching that or reading that and how it's going to make you feel? You know, I remember, some years, I'm maybe talking about 4 or 5 years or so ago, when I first where I moved to a different area and I had to pay school dinners. And we're talking about, £16 for one child and £20 for another child. That's like £36. To some people, that might seem like not much, but at that time, it's a lot of money. You've got to times that by 4 and all the other responsibilities you have. And it doesn't mean I'm taken away from the fact that I chose to have the children and it's my responsibility as a parent to look after them. But at the end of the day, we all sometimes fall on grounds that we need help. And as my background in social work, I know that there's, many children that one of their main meals, and for some, only meals, is when they come to school.
But then, Kelly, that you could have the argument, couldn't you, that actually it's up to parents to be able to balance their bills?
Yeah, I mean, I'm totally supportive of what Marcus Rashford is doing, and I'm with him 100%. And I'd rather have food in place than none in place. But I grew up in an environment where I witnessed a lot of young women taking advantage of the social system. They were just completely abusing it, sort of targeting areas of weakness on loopholes within the social benefit system and abusing it. And so for me, watching that kind of behaviour makes me feel like, is this going to encourage that slightly? Are there going to be people out there that are really taking advantage of the system? So for me, I completely support Marcus Rashford. I think what he's doing is amazing. And like I said, I'd rather have some meals than none.
But Brenda, it's a system that your family relied on when you were younger.
Yeah, I mean, I was entitled to free school meals because I was an orphan. And I think, I'm very grateful that my grandmother, who was my guardian and my carer, that she didn't have to use her pension because she was, 50-something when myself and my brother came to live with her. And I'm very grateful that she didn't have to go through that and she had that support of a free school meal. She, when we came home, she cooked that food with love and she looked after us with love, but it was just nice to know that there was that extra pressure taken off of her. So for me, it's like, I'm sad that some people might be penalised because other people have taken the system for granted when there are people that genuinely need that help and need that assistance.
And you genuinely needed the help and assistance, and you've spoken about this before online, on Twitter, and actually Marcus replied to you, didn't he?
Yeah, and that was overwhelming to receive that. And the thing that came out of that is, my children didn't realise, because I never spoke to them about the hardship that I'd gone through. They didn't realise all the hardship. If it's a choice between electricity and food, I always went with food. And that's, that was just how I was working. I was always working. I've always worked. I've paid my taxes like everybody else, but sometimes you do fall on hard times. You've got childminded, you've got this, you've got that, and it does get to some people. You
know what, Brenda, just you sharing such sensitive information regards to yourself being an orphan, I think it really highlights that when we're looking at families and children that are in the area of poverty, it's not always the same scenarios that are put out there as people who are trying to sponge off the system, which unfortunately that labels around single parents and so on and things like that. Your experience was completely different, and in that time it was really needed. And I think that's what needs to be relayed. Yes, the ones who are taking advantage of it, it needs to be stamped down.
Absolutely.
But in the area of dealing with young people and eating and living a healthy life, I think that should be, paramount to the decision of trying to feed need children who possibly are not eating throughout the periods when they're not at school.
And I guess it's difficult, Kelly, isn't it, as Brenda said, in terms of those who perhaps don't treat the system in the way that it should be. It's quite difficult to distinguish between those that really need it and perhaps those that don't.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a shame because those that do take advantage of the system are making it more difficult for mums like Brenda, when she was in that situation, to be able to claim the assistance that they need. And there's such a stigma attached to having a school meal or being provided for in some way, that there's kind of this, you feel embarrassed almost to ask for the help or the assistance in the first place. And especially sometimes, I guess, in the Black culture, there's this sense of pride where you feel like you can't ask for the help that you need for your children and for your family.
All right, thanks very much for that, guys.